Ready? Ready?
Good.
He's like, you're looking at me. You're already messing with him, Tasha.
Soaking in.
Ready?
Yeah.
Pass.
Are you ready? Go. No?
Welcome to this public meeting of the Board of Education, Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all of the residents. We are always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items on the published agenda or other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We desire that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community. Thank you for attending. As required under the Open Public Meeting Act, NJSA 1046 et sequentia, adequate notice was given for calling this meeting. It was authorized by the Board of Education and forwarded to the municipal clerk, the Princeton Packet, and the Trenton Times on January 6, 2023. It was distributed to the schools and others on the standard distribution list. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. Board Policy 168, recording devices, requires that we inform those attending this in-person meeting that the proceedings are being recorded. This meeting is being live streamed. The representative of the sending district is authorized to vote on such matters that affect sending district students or affect the governance of the Princeton Public Schools, as more specifically designated in NJSA 18A38.1. In the event that the statute is amended, the law shall take precedence over this bylaw. Sending district votes pertaining to personnel actions refer to high school, central administrative, and district-wide staff only. Votes otherwise are considered abstentions. So being the annual reorganization of the district, I will be running the meeting until elected officers, until we elect the officers of the board. The results of the school education, Board of Education vote that happened on November 7, 2023, returning board member Beth Barron, newcoming board members Eleanor Hubbard and Adam Bierman received the most votes. That is officially certified. We will now take the oaths of our three board members starting their 3-year term. So I'll come over to each one. So you can just,
Do I need anything?
you can just repeat after me. I, Beth Barron, do solemnly swear
I, Beth Barron, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
and to the governments established in the United States and this state
and to the governments established by the United States and this state,
under the authority of the people,
under the authority of the people,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I, Beth Barron, do solemnly swear
I, Beth Barron, do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of member of Board of Education,
for the office of member of Board of Education,
and I will faithfully,
and I will faithfully,
impartially, and justly perform
impartially, and justly perform
all the duties of that office
all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my abilities, so help me God.
Congratulations. All right. Just repeat after me. I'll try to go slow. I, Eleanor Hubbard, do solemnly swear
I, I, Eleanor Hubbard, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same and to the governments established
to the same and to the governments established
in the United States and this state,
in the United States and this state,
under the authority of the people, so help me God.
under the authority of the people, so help me God.
I, Eleanor Hubbard, do solemnly swear
I, Eleanor Hubbard, do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of member of Board of Education,
for the office of member of Board of Education,
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
perform all the duties of that office
perform all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. All right. I, Adam Bierman, do solemnly swear
I, Adam Bierman, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the
and
same,
to the governments established in the United States
to the governments established in the United States
and this state under the authority of the people,
and this state under the authority of the people,
so help me God.
so help me God.
I, Adam Bierman, do solemnly swear
I, Adam Bierman, do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law.
for the office of member of the Board of Education,
Say that again.
for the office of member of the Board of Education,
For the office of member of Board of Education,
and that I will faithfully, impartially,
that I will faithfully and impartially
and justly perform
and justly perform
all the duties of that office
all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. All right. The next step in our annual reorg meeting is to officially recognize our returning Cranberry Board of Education member, Robert Christopher. I'm glad to have you back. So officially take a roll call. Betsy Baglio,
Here.
Beth Barron.
Here.
Adam Bierman.
Here.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Here.
Mara Franceschi.
Here.
Eleanor Hubbard.
Here.
Susan Cantor.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Brian McDonald.
Present.
Rob Christopher.
Here.
We have a quorum. So we acknowledge and accept the rules of parliamentary procedures for our conducting all our public meetings. I guess I've officially appointed myself as board, not as board secretary, but as temporary chair. But now we're moving on to nominations for the election of the president of the board for the calendar 2024 year. Do we have a motion to nominate?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to nominate Daphne Kendall for president of the board.
Okay.
I have something I'd like to read. Oh,
second.
Okay, I was gonna ask for a second, but yes.
okay. I would like to take this opportunity to nominate Daphne Kendall for president of the Princeton Board of Ed. 2023 was a bumpy year for the district. However, with Daphne's leadership, we were all focused on the most important thing, the students. And everything Daphne does for the district is focused on supporting all our students. And I know she will continue to always put all our students first. Daphne not only has been the president for 2 years, but she also has a full-time job and a daughter in high school. And somehow she manages to return and comment on board members, administration, union leadership, students, and concerned families' phone calls and emails. Daphne's superpower is her ability to listen to all parties involved and create a solution where each party feels they receive something. She has successfully continued open conversations with our 3 unions, which has supported a positive work environment and a place for our students to learn and grow. She continues to ensure all board members have the same information. The board does not always agree on issues, which is democracy at work, but two things the board has unanimously agreed on has been electing Daphne as board president for the past 2 years. Again, I would like to nominate Daphne Kendall for board president for 2024.
Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations for board president? Is there a motion to close nominations? Debbie Bronfeld and Beth Barron, second that. All right, but we'll go through the process of a roll call vote. Betsy Baglio,
Yes.
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Adam Bierman,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Eleanor Hubbard,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Rob Christopher.
Yes.
All right, so it's unanimous.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for your very kind words. A little too much, but thank you. And I just want to say, thank you all for your confidence, and I hope this year we really can focus on the students. And just ensuring that, teaching and learning are happening at the highest levels that we expect. So thank you again. Now I'm in charge. Okay. I was going to ask you if you wanted to take a break and bask in the hour.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
So can I get a nomination for vice president, please? Susan, second. Beth? Any discussion?
I would like to make a comment, please. I am delighted to not.
Who do you want to nominate?
I was going to say, I'm delighted to nominate Betsy Baglio to continue her role as vice president of the board.
Beth, second.
Her educational knowledge, keen organization skills, respect in the community, and knowledge of our community make her the right person to continue in this role. Always assume positive intent, a word she has modeled, and as we have developed our board norms and has ensured that we try to have respectful dialogue between all members of our board. I know with her as vice president that we can continue to support our administration in the best way possible. I thank her for wanting to continue on in this role.
Are there any other nominations? Can I get a motion to close the nomination? Mara, second. Rob. Okay,
Great.
Mr. Bolden.
All right, so formality, Betsy Baglio,
Yes.
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Adam Bierman,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Eleanor Hubbard,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
and Rob Christopher.
Yes.
Excellent, unanimous.
All right, thank you, everyone. So next on the agenda is our standing committees. So we'll just read them quickly. We are going to have an reintroducing the equity committee this year with co-chairs Betsy Baglio and Debbie Bronfeld. Brian McDonald, myself, and Eleanor Hubbard will be on that committee. And Dr. Foster will work with Mr. Bolden to come up with a committee schedule in the next week or so. I believe there are some meetings next week. When we get to that, if you're the chair and you know there's going to be a meeting next week, please use the time to inform the members because I just found out. And the public, yeah. Long-term planning, we have these three board members work together, Susan Cantor, Brian McDonald, and Beth Barron. So we made them chairs of both the long-term planning committee and the operations committee. And we could not be in better hands with these three board members who work so well together. On the long-term planning commission, along with them is Debbie Bronfeld and Mara Franceschi. And on the operations committee is Mara and Adam Bierman. Next up is personnel. We have co-chairs Debbie Bronfeld and Mara Franceschi. And on that committee is Betsy Baglio, Brian McDonald, and myself. policy. Beth Barron's the chair. Beth was away and she called me at like 5 o'clock and she was like, is there anything actually a little earlier, 2 o'clock? Is there anything I need to know? I'm like, well, you're chairing policy by myself, if that's okay. So thank you, Beth. And on that committee is Betsy, Susan, Eleanor, and Adam. And then we have the Student Achievement Committee. Betsy's going to chair it. I'm on that committee. Debbie's on that committee. Susan is on the committee, and Eleanor is on the committee. That's the one that did not go in alphabetical order. Okay, and Mara and Rob will be the alternates on that committee.
And can I jump in to say we do have a Student Achievement Committee meeting next week, Tuesday the 9th, on Zoom at 10:30 in the morning. If that is a problem for any of the members of the committee, let me know. But that is something we wanted to. 10:30 on Zoom. We'll publish the agenda. Will be on the website for the public. You're welcome to join us 10:30 on Tuesday the 9th.
And is that going to be the standing? No.
We're gonna call you back to Fridays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk about
Okay, thank you. All right, and the other committees, meeting dates will come out next week, by next week.
And
We do have a committee, do we have a community forum on the 6th, which is Saturday
Yes.
at 9?
at 9:30.
At
And
the middle school?
Long-term planning is having a community forum, which is going to be a committee of the whole meeting, so the full board will be invited. There will be no action, but we will be talking about the recommendations for the long-term facilities plan that were presented at the December 14th meeting. So if you want to have a review of that record, again, there was a long presentation by our professionals, and we will be back on the 6th in person at the middle school to talk with the community about those plans.
And then there's a Zoom meeting, right, the following week,
Tuesday the 9th.
Tuesday the 9th at 7.
And we are sending out a blast to families and communities tomorrow morning. We're
Great.
waiting until after the reorg, but it's all ready to go.
Great, thank you.
And I'll just jump in to say, all of the committee dates, once finalized, will be on our website. And we do make a real concerted effort. We want to thank our staff for putting our agendas on our website a day or two in advance. Sometimes it's that morning because we're finalizing things. But if you're a member of the public who'd like to join us, please check our website.
So now moving on, board president's report. I don't have anything to report except to say Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everyone had a restful holiday break and look forward to a fun year with everyone. This should be fun and a productive year. So thank you. Moving on now to the code of ethics with our esteemed attorney, Mr. Lapira. And Mr. Lapira, if you could just say, just introduce it, why we do this, that it's required.
Sure,
et cetera.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me here to present on the Code of Ethics. It's it may not be the most interesting presentation you'll ever hear, but I will try to make it as interesting as possible. But it is important to do it, and as we'll talk about when we go through the slides, 25, 30 years ago or so is when this legislature decided that it was important to have a Code of Ethics for school board members. And since that time, we've had a number of advisory opinions and decisions to help inform us about what the public expects and what board members are required to do, and school administrators as well. They're not covered by the Code of Ethics, but they are covered by the School Ethics Act. So we're going to present today on a couple of issues here, one of which will be, if we go to the next, or once we start the presentation, there we go, maybe, there we go. All right, so if we go to the next slide, we'll see what the agenda is for this evening. And we're going to talk about the role of a board member, what it is to be a board member, what you do, what you don't do, the Code of Ethics, which is important. We have to annually have a discussion about the Code of Ethics as per the law. Free speech in the School Ethics Act, how those things intersect, and then recusal, when is it necessary? When are there situations in which board members need to recuse themselves or refrain from engaging in certain discussions or voting? So we'll talk about all those things. But first, the role of the board member. So in terms of the role of the board member, if we go to the next slide, what does the board member do? What are boards of education? So the most important piece to know about there is that obviously we have boards of education that are organized to run public school districts. They are created by statute. It's in Title 18A of the New Jersey statutes. And there is a broad definition of what boards of education are permitted to do and what they're required to do. One of the first things is enforce the rules of the New Jersey State Board of Education. So what does that mean? That means that if the State Board of Ed has some kind of a rule that we don't particularly like, our obligation is to try to get that changed, but we still have to follow it. And we saw in some different places, there were some boards didn't want to follow certain rules. Maybe it had to do with masking or other things like that. And you have to follow the rules of the New Jersey State Board of Education and state law, of course. Boards are also required to and may make, amend, or repeal rules for how your board and how your school district is going to operate, about the government of the school district and the management of the schools and the management of the employees. So those are all things that boards are required to do. And then the catch-all is to perform all acts and do all things consistent with the law and the rules of the state board that are necessary to operate the school district, basically. So if we turn to the next slide, what does that do exactly? So one of the things that you'll do as a Board of Education is to approve curriculum. That curriculum has to meet New Jersey student learning standards that are promulgated by the Department of Education. Again, there have been some boards throughout the state that don't like that, whether it has to do with certain types of curricula, but it has to meet the state standards. And if people don't like those state standards, they need to lobby to get them changed, but you still have to adhere to them so long as they are in effect. Adopt a budget. That has to happen every year. It is, it's Matt's favorite part of the year, is doing the budget. But we have to have a budget that provides for a thorough and efficient education. That's guaranteed by the Constitution of the state of New Jersey. And that's one of the things that board members have to do. Also hire the necessary certified personnel to educate this district students. Now, a little distinction there. The board approves all the hiring, but the recommendation is always made by the superintendent. In fact, there's a statute that says that the board can only hire or terminate or renew or discipline employees only at the recommendation of the superintendent. So the only time the board acts without the recommendation of the superintendent in hiring someone is when you hire the superintendent. Other than that, that's it. Superintendent makes the recommendations. You don't have to vote yes, but the superintendent makes the recommendations, and then those get approved by the board. And then, of course, one of the more important pieces is developing policies for the management of the school district. That is really one of the biggest roles of the Board of Education, is to oversee what the administration is doing, how the school is run. Not to run the schools, but to oversee all that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through some of these next slides. But again, the board acts as an entity, not as individual members. You're all members of the board, but the board acts as an entity, majority rule. And when it makes a decision, that's what ultimately will be the school district's position or policies on a certain matter. So when can you take official action? When does the board act? Now, we talk about committee meetings, and those are important meetings, and those are going to be meetings where information is gathered, things are teased out, we come up with recommended actions. But at the end of the day, those are all recommendations made to the board. The board as a whole is what votes on and decides to take action with regard to specific, whether it's policies or approving contracts or things like that. And that only can happen at a board meeting like this one where you have a quorum, which is a majority of the full board, and when it's in session. And that's a public meeting. The votes are taken publicly. There is a requirement to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. Some things that I always bring up here is that we talk about the committee actions are not official board action. Those are recommendations. When it comes to things like emails and text messages, this was not such an issue when the Open Public Meetings Act was promulgated 40 years ago because it didn't really exist. But in theory, if board members were communicating kind of in real time back and forth with like instant messaging or things like that, that could constitute a meeting if you're discussing things and how you're going to proceed. So we always tell people, don't do that. Every now and then, the board president, for example, might have to send something out to the board members saying this is for information only, please don't reply all. And the reason you might see that is because we're not trying to have a meeting without giving notice to the public. So that's when boards act. Okay, and I think I had this slide in here twice. It's so nice we had it twice, but we can go to the next one. If we go to the next, the board, the administration. So what I like to kind of analogize this to is, the board is a corporation for all intents and purposes. It's a public corporation, and like corporations have a CEO and a CFO and a board of directors, the Board of Education is like the Board of Directors. They are the ones who essentially manage and oversee and provide guidance to the CEO and CFO. So their job is to big picture things, making policies, developing plans, evaluating outcomes, but not managing day-to-day operations. That's where there have been, as you'll see in some of the cases that we give examples of, that's where some board members, not here, but in other places, have gotten in trouble from time to time by overstepping their roles. And both board policy and the law essentially state that you can't exercise any administrative responsibility with respect to the schools or as an individual command the services of any school employee, right? That's something that is done by the superintendent, and if the board makes a decision about something, the superintendent implements that decision or sees that it is implemented. In terms of board member access to the schools, that's not actually a thing, right? Board members don't have any greater access than anybody else, any other parent or community member. And if you do visit the schools, you still have to, in accordance with actually it's bylaw 146, you still have to observe the district regulations for school visitors. So again, that last part of the slide here, when we talk about the superintendent, what does the superintendent do? Administering the district, keeping the board informed, making all these operational recommendations. Your business administrator is going to oversee business and maintenance, the budget, all those, serving as the official purchasing agent. All those things are necessary from a financial perspective to keep the district running. So then if we look at, that board administration relationship a little bit more in detail, and this doesn't really happen very often, but it does happen in some school districts. I mean, the goal is to have that cooperative and not adversarial relationship. I mean, there can be concerns, of course. There can be times when a decision is made and maybe some board members don't like the decision or whatever it is, but that's fine. That will happen. I mean, it's rare that people agree 100% on everything all the time, but what I would say in terms of the ethics, in terms of having a good board and having that administered well is, if there's something on the agenda that you see and you're thinking, oh, I don't know if I support this or whatever, always go to the administration first before the meeting. Don't wait until the meeting. You can get most of your questions answered before the meeting, and it's probably a better time to do that. There's more time to discuss that, so forth and so on. And then, of course, don't forget there are some things that aren't permissible or aren't permitted to be discussed in public. So those are things that might need to be discussed one-on-one with the superintendent or the business administrator, as the case may be. And then, of course, if there's a community complaint, which rarely happens, right? But every now and then you get a complaint from the community. If you get that, if you're at the soccer field or you're at the local grocery store and someone says, hey, I have a problem with this. Well, the responsibility is to refer that to the superintendent. That's consistent with the Code of Ethics. That's consistent with bylaw 142. Refer to the superintendent. The superintendent will then have an obligation to see that that gets addressed either herself or by sometimes it gets addressed at the lowest possible level, whether it's through a teacher or a principal, whatever the case may be. And the board is not supposed to act on any of those complaints until there is what they characterize as a failure of an administrative solution. Then it would do that at a public meeting, but not doing that in private. So again, just keeping that in mind. And when we talk about the Code of Ethics, if we look at the next slide there, one of the responsibilities of the Code of Ethics, and we'll go through each specific piece of it, but one of the responsibilities is to support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties, right? And what that effectively means is that board members should not be taking any deliberate action that undermines or opposes or compromises or harms school personnel who are properly performing their duties. That's the responsibility of the board members, to support school personnel. On the rare occasion that we have school personnel that aren't properly performing their duties, we're going to be handling that. And that'll be something that the superintendent will take care of. But so long as they are, we should be supporting that. Again, does it mean that you can't disagree with the recommendation that's made by the superintendent or the business administrator? No, you can disagree with that. But generally speaking, that support for the administration needs to be there. And criticizing, I say the superintendent here, that kind of applies to various administrators as well. But if it undermines your administration or otherwise compromises their ability to do their job, that could be an ethics violation. So that's something we always have to be mindful of. That's why those private conversations are important when it comes to that kind of feedback. So again, kind of remembering the board acts as a unit, not as individuals. By all means, and I know that we do this here, but share opinions. I know that there have been, over the course of years, numerous items that maybe the board sat here and debated about whether to vote yes or no on something for an hour or more, right? And that's part of the democratic process. But in the end, you have a vote, and it's a single course of action determined by majority vote. When it comes to meetings and communications with the public at the meetings, I mean, basically the superintendent or your board president is going to be the one that's going to be responding to the public, if at all, depending upon the situation. But it's only the board president who speaks on behalf of the board, absent some other authorization that's given by the board as a whole. And we talked about this one before. No board member can exercise any administrative responsibility with respect to the schools or as an individual, command the services of any school district employee. Again, just a reminder, so no supervisory authority, just as an entity overseeing the school district as well. In terms of confidentiality, which is on our next slide there, one thing that's important to remember, and this is something that I see come up in a lot of school districts, there's a goal and a desire, as is appropriate, to have transparency. And that is important, except to the extent that we're prohibited from doing that, right? And that's particularly important when it comes to issues that are confidential, that the Code of Ethics requires board members to keep confidential. And what are some of those things? They could be about personnel matters. That is probably the number one that comes up, but also student matters. That's protected by New Jersey law, protected by FERPA, which is the federal law. It could be things about negotiations, where disclosing that information could be, potentially harmful to the negotiations process. So it's an important component. It's a difficult component because board members are often asked questions, well, why is this happening or why is that not happening? And oftentimes, what can we tell them? We can say, I can't discuss that, it's a personnel matter. It's not designed to infuriate the public by any means. It's just that we have to respect the privacy rights of those employees or the privacy rights of students. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there is a student matter that might gain some notoriety. Can we talk about it to the public? No, we can't. So those are important things, and that's embedded in the Code of Ethics that we have to keep certain things confidential. So we've talked a lot about the Code of Ethics, but now we'll talk about it and look specifically at what it requires. And I should go back a little bit here. The School Ethics Act was enacted, I think it was like 30 years ago or so. I forget the exact, or excuse me, it was 2001. That was the exact time. That was when the Code of Ethics was enacted. I think the actual School Ethics Act was a few years before that. But when it was enacted, the purpose was to establish a number of acts that are what they classify as prohibited acts. Acting in ways that are essentially like self-dealing or acting in ways where there would be some type of a conflict of interest. There's a whole section that deals with conflicts of interest. But separate and apart from that is the Code of Ethics for school board members. And so the School Ethics Commission is a state agency that oversees all of this. If there are complaints or if there's a belief that there's a violation of an ethics or the Code of Ethics, individuals can file a complaint with the School Ethics Commission. They can take a number of actions if it's proven to be true, which could be reprimand or censure, which are basically, reprimand is just something that the board member gets from the School Ethics Commission. A censure would require that at a public board meeting, the board read out that board member was censured. That's never fun. And there's also the potential for suspension or removal, which I have seen both. They're pretty rare, but it does happen. So your bylaw 142 incorporates and identifies all those, the Code of Ethics. And there is a distinction. If there's a violation of the Prohibited Acts section, then that can be prosecuted by a Deputy Attorney General, which is pretty significant. If there is just a violation alleged by the Code of Ethics, then that's prosecuted by whoever's making the complaint. And depending upon the nature of the complaint, board members may or may not be entitled to indemnification for the legal fees and the cost of their defense. So that's why it's always important to make sure that we are looking very carefully at the code of ethics. So if we look at the code of ethics, there are, 9 to 10 different components here. The first one is self-explanatory, to uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Ed and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes should be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. So we talked about that a little bit before, but that's the general framework. Yeah.
So as you know, we have to read the code of ethics.
Yes.
Should we do that after your discussion?
Yeah, I think we can do that. We can have, or what we could do is we could have each person read one of those, and then I can just talk about that. How do you like?
Okay, so we'll start with Rob.
Yeah.
Not there. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, and regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures.
Okay, and let's turn to B.
I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools which meet individual needs of all children regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
Okay, and that one's pretty self-explanatory. So we have policies that deal exactly with that. The next one.
I will confine my board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and I will help to frame policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them.
Okay, and we've talked about that one quite a bit too, but that's fairly self-explanatory. As part of the process, you have a variety of policy committee meetings that are discussed in public. I think in some cases the public has the ability to attend some of those meetings, so that's part of the consultation process to make sure that the public is aware. We do first and second readings, so the way that the board enacts policies is compliant with the code of ethics.
I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run.
Right, and again, talked about that a little bit already, but that one is straightforward. Superintendent administers the schools and the board evaluates the superintendent. And that's how you see that they're well run.
I will recognize that authority rests with the Board of Education, and I will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board.
And this one you'll see, as we talk a little later, comes up a lot when it comes to letters to the editor or social media posts or things like that. That's the most common allegation of a violation, that there were some personal promises or private action that could compromise the board. That's also the same thing that might be involved if someone breached confidentiality rules and let out information. That could compromise the board, and that's something that if an individual board member is doing it, that's private action. So that's important to know. So if we go to the next slide that has the rest.
I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interests or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends.
And that one, pretty straightforward. I mean, the board is even though you get elected, it's we don't run for the election based upon any political parties. And obviously, it's all being done for the purposes of ensuring that the school and the school district is doing well, not for personal gain.
I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools, which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and, in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school.
Yeah, that one's straightforward too. And again, also providing accurate information. I don't see a lot of violations of that, but I see a lot of allegations of violations of that through the school ethics.
I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Right, and that's what we talked about. The superintendent makes the recommendation, and then the board, votes yes or no. Do you have a question?
Yeah, about the confidentiality one. When it says, I will provide accurate information, on the one hand, I can see it says you can't provide inaccurate information, right? You're providing information that has to be accurate. But is it a positive command to answer questions, right? If someone asks for information that you will provide accurate information?
It's not specifically. I mean, typically what it would be is the board, to the extent that, for example, we have public comment, right? That happens at board meetings. Those aren't designed necessarily as question and answer, but oftentimes after the public has made all their comments, the superintendent or the board president may have responses to those. And sometimes you'll see that the board president may say, okay, Brian, you're on this committee. Could you address that question? And he might. So it's not an obligation to respond, but when we do respond, we need to make sure that we provide accurate information.
Let's see where am
I think aye.
I will support and protect school personnel in proper performance of their duties.
Right. We talked a little bit about that already. And then Jay, the last one. Oh, here, I'm going to give you the.
Oh, thank you. Testing. I will refer all complaints to the CEO and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution.
So that's consistent with the idea that we don't administer the schools, we don't run the schools. If there is a complaint, we refer to the superintendent who will address it. All right, so to take a look at that and how that kind of happens in practice.
I think we missed two.
Did we?
Yeah,
We have 12 on this sheet.
yeah, so I think,
Wait a minute.
yeah,
I would behave toward my.
Is it in your policy or? is it-
Yeah.
That one.
oh, this is the policy.
Oh, so the
Years
policy has
ago.
more.
Look, can we read them?
Yeah, you can read
So,
it. That's fine.
I will behave toward my fellow board members with the respect due their office, demonstrating courtesy, decorum, and fair play at all public meetings and in all public statements. And then we missed. Okay. I will refrain from inappropriate conduct in public meetings and in making public statements, refraining from any disparagement of my fellow board members or others on a personal, social, racial, or religious basis.
So those are two excellent tenets that are in your bylaw, which should be in the School Ethics Act, but aren't. But I'm glad I had palpitations for a second there, thinking I forgot that. But those are important too. And that's a mark of a good board that you have those, because that is how the process should go. We can disagree with each other, and it can be done in a reasonable way and without name calling or anything like that. And we haven't really seen that here. So in terms of the code of ethics and how we do it, again, personnel decisions, that's kind of the way that we look at it and see what the limitations on the board members are. Because sometimes you'll hear as board members, well, you hired this person or you did that right away. We say, well, we are not directly involved in hiring. The superintendent makes a recommendation, we listen to the recommendation, we look into the information, and we vote yes or no. But the superintendent does make the recommendation. You can't. The law says that you can't withhold the approval for arbitrary or capricious reasons. So we can't just decide, we're going to throw a dart at the dartboard, and depending upon what number it lands on, we're going to say yes or no. If there's a reason to vote no, it's got to be a valid reason. In terms of hiring and people being involved in interviews or things like that, typically what the School Ethics Act wants and what most boards do is to have the board really only involved in the hiring practice for the superintendent of schools. There are limited scenarios where board members can sit in on some other interviews for like high-level positions, but even that's discouraged, generally speaking, because the idea is you don't want to unnecessarily influence the superintendent of schools who's going to make that decision. Can it happen? Yes. Should we limit it as much as we can? Yes, also. So in terms of some examples of things that might be violations of the code of ethics, straightforward, giving a direct order to school personnel, or getting involved in day-to-day operation of the school district, definitely going to be a violation. Taking some type of deliberate action that undermines or compromises or harms school personnel who are just doing their duties, also a violation. And then if you try to resolve a complaint, we all want to help people. That's probably why you got here and you got elected to the Board of Education. And sometimes there's a desire to say, you know what? I'm sorry you're having this problem. I'll take care of it for you. No, I will refer to the superintendent, who I'm pretty sure will take care of it for you. That's the correct answer. We're not going to do it ourselves as board members, or you're not going to do it yourselves as board members, but the superintendent has to get that referral. And if we move to the next slide, so advisory opinions, as I indicated previously, the School Ethics Commission will sometimes issue decisions where there's a contested case, but if a board member has a question about whether they can do something or not, they can request an advisory opinion through the School Ethics Commission. We don't have to, but we typically assist with that when it's necessary. And so there are a couple of important advisory opinions that have come out. This one, A1510, talks about not having board members get involved in exit interviews of staff members. If that's something that should be done, the superintendent or the HR department should be doing that. And that could be a suggestion that the board says, well, I think it would be great if you did exit interviews, but we can't do those because that would go beyond policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and it would be engaging in administrative functions. So that's an example of an advisory opinion that came out delineating that role. A31-15, again, interviewing personnel, we kind of talked about that just before, but the superintendent's the person who has to make those decisions about appointments. So yeah, for like high level administrative positions, could you have a scenario in which you have like a board member or two on a committee to listen, to observe? That's fine, but it should not be making recommendations, giving a lot of feedback, things of that nature. So just strictly advisory. If we look at the next one, that one has to do with, let me just see, 32-14. So these are a series that have to do with volunteering, which is a little bit odd because you're volunteering to be on the Board of Ed, but it's like some volunteering is okay, but not all volunteering is okay. Why? That's because there are certain scenarios. So you'll see like the first two are problematic. One was trying to assist with casting, rehearsals, and lighting for school theatrical productions. That was a problem because it was going to require that board member to give direct orders to school personnel and students. That's too much. Same thing with being a leader of a school club that meets on school grounds. Because if you're a leader of that club, now you're potentially having all this contact with students, parents, administrators, constant presence in the school. That's a problem. However, what can you do? Can you volunteer by constructing sets for the school musicals or the play? Sure, because limited interaction with the school staff. If I recall correctly, that one was being done like after school hours when the kids weren't even there. Assisting the marching band by building props, repairing equipment, and loading and unloading equipment, not as the lead volunteer, that's fine too. If you are part of the local educational foundation, that's fine. However, if there are issues that come up that have to do with interactions with the local educational foundation, you need to recuse yourself if you serve on both boards there. And if you want to work the change as a volunteer at a high school football game, maybe in my youth I would have liked to do that, maybe not now, but if you do want to do that, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. That doesn't violate the School Ethics Act. That kind of volunteering is pretty passive. There are a couple of notable decisions here. I feel bad sometimes reading the names of these people who engaged in these actions, but then again, I didn't do it, they did. So I remember this one because I was the attorney involved in this first case, but there was a board member who decided that she wanted to know who was being recommended or who was not being recommended and wanted to review resumes for a candidate in an open position. And she tried, and the resumes were behind a locked office, and she tried to get someone to give her access to that locked office. Was just, going above and beyond in a bad way. So that was a censure. That was back in 2006, 2007. That went beyond policymaking, planning, and appraisal. That's something that if she wanted to see the resume, she could have made an appointment with the superintendent to talk about them, so forth and so on, but not saying unlock the HR person's office so I can go in the files and look myself. No, not permitted. In Garrity versus Vanderwood, there was a weird situation where two board members thought the director of special services was double dipping. They conducted their own investigation. Do not do that. That's not your job. Your job is to refer to the superintendent. And guess what? They were wrong, by the way. They didn't have all the information, so they got in trouble for that. This one, I know this is kind of a funny term, but like this board member did her own research. There was a recommendation made by the board, by the superintendent to use MacBooks for their one-to-one program. This board member did not like that, so she started soliciting quotations on Chromebooks from other vendors and also talked to other boards of education's business administrators saying, hey, we're looking into getting Chromebooks. No, they weren't. So that was a problem. That's fine if that person disagreed with the idea of using MacBooks and said, I think we should really look into Chromebooks, but that's the responsibility of the business administrator and the superintendent to look into that issue and to give a report. And her perspective, wrongly, was that, well, I didn't think that the report or the feasibility study was detailed enough. Okay, well, then that's how you evaluate the superintendent. but you don't do your own research there. So, a weird situation here in Englewood Cliffs where we had a board member who, I can only say, knowingly participated in an executive session that had to do with matters involving her own child. So, I mean, there were a number of quotes that came right from the case. I mean, she should have known she was not permitted to listen to confidential discussions about a matter in which she had a direct conflict. It should be obvious to any board member who's ever undergone ethics training that a matter involving a family member is a conflict, and board members cannot be present for confidential discussions in those matters for which they have a conflict. And other board members didn't know that it involved her child because it was like when you do like HIP reports, they kept them anonymous or whatever, but that didn't excuse the behavior. Actually, it kind of made it worse, in my opinion. That person was censured as well.
Just censored.
Yeah, not removed, not suspended. But again, that's maybe because it was the first offense. This Teaching versus Rogers case, this is kind of a weird situation. This case, some of these cases are more recent, like the last couple of cases are all recent cases. The board member was seemingly doing a good thing, planning a unity walk on school grounds. It wasn't district sponsored, it wasn't district approved, but she was sending out emails, doing fundraising, scheduling speakers, and implying that it was board sponsored, which potentially compromised the board. And she also reached out to a political entity. I don't know if it was like some local Democratic club or whatever it was, but she wrote in the email, just between you and me, and then went to go on and talk about like the structure of this unity walk. And the school ethics commission said like that statement was a clear indication that she was hiding information or attempting to hide information, but what the true purpose of the rally was. So they said it was private action that had the potential to compromise the board. I think the person was well intentioned, but the way that she was going about doing it was a problem. A few other ones that have to do with, this is one. This is one which was problematic, which was contacting staff members directly via text messages, questioning the decision of the building principal, kind of going against and behind the superintendent. And what they said there was, this was also a censure, which was that, you can't speak to teachers and then try to undermine the principal by saying, well, I think this wasn't done. Or it had to do with chorus and whether they were going to go to some event or not go to some event. And the board member was, I guess, incensed about it and then started, I guess, bad-mouthing the principal and so forth and so on. So this was all failing to support personnel in the proper performance of their duties, and also private action that could compromise the board. It could have led to a lawsuit by the employees against the board, so that was problematic. And in this strange case, I would say there was a board member who, I guess they were in this particular school district, the NFL wanted to use their field for something or their facilities for something. And I guess it was a big deal, which it is a big deal, right? So there was confidential information that was being shared, but this guy was a little too excited to share that with other people before that had been finalized. And so that was a problem. It was pre-decisional, it was deliberative information. He should have waited until the board decided what they were doing, and he kind of got out ahead of it. So those were cases there. Now, there's a couple of what I'm going to call free speech cases. This first one, I actually handled this one, but it was board members had used a general disclaimer on their Facebook pages saying, like, I am a board member, but these opinions are my own, they're not sanctioned by the board, so forth and so on. A member of the public thought that this was inappropriate when they were recommending other people to run for the Board of Ed during the election, filed a school ethics complaint, and I think was insinuating, wasn't really clear, but was insinuating that they had to put that disclaimer on every post or every reply, which I think would be interesting. I don't know how you would do that, like where there's limits on how many characters you can put on your tweets or whatever it is, whatever they're called these days. But the commission looked at it and they dismissed it. And they said, no, there's a general disclaimer on the Facebook pages. That should be known. However, they still used this was used during their campaign. It was this one said Michael Pontillo for Westwood Regional School District Board of Ed. That was misleading in the sense that he was now on the board. So it wasn't a violation, but the School Ethics Commission said you should really change the name of your Facebook page because people might think that it's official in some way. Now, this other case, or these other two cases, are weird to me because there's a lot of incendiary and inflammatory comments on these web pages or these Facebook pages. And there was no disclaimer, nor did they identify themselves as board members. So you would think, well, that's probably going to be a violation. But oddly enough, the School Ethics Commission said, look, these are personal Facebook pages. It has no information about their membership on the board. There's no reason to believe that they're making it in their capacity as a board. And just because some people know that they're board members, but she's not advertising it or they're not advertising it, doesn't mean that they're being done in her official capacity. So I was a little surprised by that. I thought it might go the other way. However, they did go so far as to say that the statements that, you can see some of those statements up there, runs counter to the level of decorum expected from publicly elected school officials who are charged with serving New Jersey student population. And that's true. That's just that's a nice sampling of some of the things they wrote on their Facebook pages. So just keep in mind, it wasn't a violation there, but it could have been a violation. And I think they kind of, got by the skin of their teeth on that. If we look at the next slide, when we talk specifically about your First Amendment rights, free speech, so forth and so on, so you're still citizens, you still have your First Amendment rights, you still can give your opinion on various things, but just keep in mind, if you're doing it through a letter to the editor or a social media post or whatever, just remember that A, you can't make any personal promises or take private action that can compromise the board. The board only acts as an entity, and you have to make sure that you keep information that's confidential. You have to provide accurate information. So, even if you put a disclaimer on it, there have been cases where someone put a disclaimer, but they said, well, this kind of invective or this kind of inappropriate comments really exceeded the disclaimer. So I think if you look at the next slide coming up, that's one where there was an op-ed endorsing various candidates for an upcoming board election, but he was openly advocating for another board member's non-election. And he's writing this endorsement on his personal behalf, his opinions are his own, but didn't get approval from the board before writing this op-ed. And they said, yeah, that disclaimer wasn't really enough. And it gave an unwarranted advantage to the candidates because it looked like the board was endorsing them, but it was really just you. So it's a little bit, when we look at all those cases, a little bit hard to know sometimes. What I would say is, if there's a doubt, either A, don't post it, or B, maybe get an advisory opinion, or maybe, reach out to the attorney to find out, hey, is this okay? Because sometimes people have gotten into trouble for doing that. So
You charge every time you get a call.
I do charge as we're required to do. However, you could always get an advisory opinion from the School Ethics Commission, which is of no charge. In terms of social media guidelines, you do have a policy that specifically, or a bylaw that specifically applies to that. And there's a number of things in your bylaw that says that you should do. I mean, some of these are self-evident, I think. What I typically would like to say when it comes to social media is just, use good judgment. And the way that I characterize that, I give two kind of guidelines. Number one, don't post anything that you wouldn't want seen. Originally I said that you wouldn't want seen on the cover of the New York Times, but that's kind of a dated reference, right? So I guess nothing that you would want to go viral. If it went viral, would you be embarrassed about it? Would you say, oh God, this is bad? If it is, don't post that. And then the second one is, if you're sitting there and you're typing something, I wonder if I should post this, you can stop because you've answered your own question. Because if you had to wonder it, the answer is yes, someone's going to get offended by it or whatever it is. So, but you do have very specific requirements there by your bylaw. So just be mindful of those, keep those in mind. You should not be engaging necessarily with the public as the authority or saying, well, this is the board's position or whatever it is. That should come through official channels.
We like to ask questions.
Yeah, good, yeah.
And also like school email, you have to have a quorum. Some people want to ask you direct questions you can't answer. You don't have to answer it. You say, I don't have a quorum.
Well, so what I would do is if questions come in, I would always refer those to the superintendent. Right. I mean, there are scenarios where they say, hey, did the board vote in favor of this or not in favor of it? Yeah, you can answer that. You can say like, yeah, it happened on, it's a public meeting. You can see that, but yeah, factual, but again, conveying accurate information. If there's anything that is remotely like a complaint, refer that to the superintendent. So when we do post on social media, which is a reality, and I think happens, one of the things that we need to remember when we look at this next slide here is that number one, use a disclaimer. That should happen. This again, if the content is fine, This disclaimer is fine. And the reason I say that, there was a case, I didn't talk about it here, but there was a case where someone, I think it was the Lodi Board of Ed, the guy put a disclaimer on a social media or blog that he had or whatever it was, that said all sorts of horrible and nasty things about the union president in that school district. They were inaccurate, they were defamatory. He got suspended for 6 months. That is, so you can have a disclaimer, but if you didn't go and say all sorts of horrible things, the disclaimer doesn't mean anything. So this disclaimer is appropriate. Again, it doesn't mean that there's no violation if you use a disclaimer. And if you don't have a disclaimer, it may not be a violation, but I would always use the disclaimer. The subject and the nature of it is important. And then if anyone had a campaign website or a campaign Facebook page or whatever it is, I would change that to just be like, a personal page, if you will. If you continue to say so-and-so for the Board of Ed, it's just going to cause confusion. It's going to lead to the following ethics complaints. I handled one for 2 board members, and there was an issue there. So, and then the last thing that we'll go through is conflicts of interest and recusal. So the most important definitions you need to know that are going to come up are immediate family member. That's your spouse or dependent child residing in the same household. Relative is much broader. That covers basically everybody, whether related by blood, marriage, or adoption, except it doesn't cover cousins. But basically everybody else. I mean, those are all the people that you see there that are important. So when it comes to conflicts, if we turn to the next slide there, there may be case-by-case conflicts if a board member or your relative is involved in an out-of-district union, for example. So there was an advisory opinion. This is the one that we always look back to. So if there's an out-of-district relative, the question that comes up is, can I vote on the contract, or can I be in negotiations? Well, it depends. I mean, if it's an immediate family member, the answer is no. If it's a relative, maybe. Is your relative an officer in the NJEA or the local education association? If so, no. Are they on that other school district's negotiating team? If that's the case, no. Or are they have other leadership role, a grievance chair, president of the union, whatever it is. I mean, so if there's some tie to your relatives being part of a union leadership or whatever, yeah, that's something that you need to be aware of. So now that you're on the Board of Education, if there are people that you haven't talked to in a while, but they may be involved in schools, reach out to them and find out whether or not they have any leadership roles in any unions, because it might affect what you can and can't do. Now, this only applied to board members' relatives, but if you are also employed out of district in a school district, then these same kind of things are going to apply. And then this last, or second to last slide here, is what I'm going to refer to as a cheat sheet. The one that's okay in schools, not the ones that are getting you in trouble. But this is a nice cheat sheet here that kind of lets you know, and I always refer to this when people ask me questions. So can you participate in negotiations if you're in a union? No. If you're in a similar union statewide. If your spouse is in a similar union statewide, pretty much no. Dependent child, no. For non-dependent child, maybe. It depends. If they're in the local union here, if you have a non-dependent child who's employed here, then no. But if you have a non-dependent child who's employed in, I don't know, say Cranberry or whatever, yeah, that's probably fine, absent any kind of other conflict. And then relatives, the same kind of thing. And so there are some circumstances where you can't participate in negotiations, but you can vote to ratify the contract. There are other cases where you can't. So if your spouse is employed here, or your dependent child is employed here, you can't participate in negotiations or vote on the contract. In other cases, you can. And then in evaluating of the superintendent, it depends. If you have a spouse who is employed in the district who's directly or indirectly supervised by the superintendent, then no, you can't participate in the evaluation of the superintendent or a dependent child, so forth and so on. There's a lot of permutations, which is why I always look at this kind of cheat sheet. But if there are board members who think that they might have a conflict, obviously reach out to the superintendent, HR, they'll get you the answer. I'm sure pretty easily. And then I think the last slide is that the last slide? Yeah, that's the last slide is whether or not anybody has any questions that haven't already been asked.
Just makes you afraid to do anything.
There's a lot of things that you can do. You just have to be mindful of what the limitations are.
Are there any, Brian?
Yes, would it be possible to share the presentation with us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Matt has a copy. Yeah, we'll send it out tomorrow.
Any questions?
Can I just give you, an example and see what you as an attorney would say to this? So there's sometimes frustration within the community when we can't share something that is confidential. Real frustration.
Right.
In the grocery store, at a baseball game, saying, listen, this is not fair. We want to understand more about it. What would your response be? Like, what is a legally approved response for us to be able to share?
And I have been there numerous times in different school districts where that has come up. And, I think that the response has to be that, look, I understand the frustration of not being in the know. But you've elected people to be on the board who are going to know the important details. They're going to know the confidential information that you can't know because whether it's an employee situation, whether it's a student situation, we're not allowed to reveal. But know that we know that information, the superintendent knows it, and we're making the decision in the best interest of the students based upon the information that we know. And it stinks that we can't share it, but that's just the reality. Because there certainly have been situations in the past where people say things that they shouldn't say, and then whether it's an employee or it's a student or whatever, then they have a lawsuit against the board, and then it becomes a problem. And so I think that's what the public needs to know. I know it doesn't, like, it'll never make some people happy, which is unfortunate. We can't fix that. But so long as those confidentiality rules exist, that's the answer that we have to give.
Are there any other questions about the code of ethics?
Yeah, you mentioned that when we get complaints or issues brought to us by the public, that we should automatically refer to the superintendent. My understanding is also that actually there's two things I thought we were supposed to say. One is to explain to people that if we know too much about something, if they tell us too many of the details, then we would have to recuse ourselves because ultimately if something would go all the way up the chain and not be resolved, it may come to the board and we wouldn't even know to sit.
You could be in that position, right? So.
The second thing, more practical, is that I think we're supposed to say, whatever's happened to you, it's really important that you use the chain of command.
Yes.
The chain of command is the primary way that we help facilitate our administration running the district. That there are people at every level, and that they need to follow it up through the chain of command, and then we can refer to the superintendent. But I think more practically, we should tell people first to go through the chain of command.
Absolutely.
If they're then not satisfied, then we can then refer it. But if we refer everything we hear to the superintendent, again, we have an issue of time and resources, and we want our administrator to be able to administer the schools. And so we always have to be.
Yeah, one of the first questions should be, have you spoken with the teacher? Have you spoken with the principal? Have you spoken with so-and-so about this? And if they say, no, I haven't, we say, well, that's kind of where you have to start. I mean, if you still don't have if you still haven't found the solution that you're looking for, then bring it to the superintendent. And that's, so that it should follow the chain of command.
And we do have a helpful website page on that. I think thanks to Betsy years ago, you created something on the district website that actually says this is the chain of command.
Any other questions? Betsy, Debbie.
So Vic, and it goes a little with Betsy's, we have a lot of closed meetings. We have a lot of closed committee meetings, like we'll have an open and then a closed.
Right.
And that information really is just amongst the board. Like, we've had a lot of long, big stuff this past year, and the whole spouse thing, family.
Yeah, even that, unfortunately, we can't even tell them, right? There's no like spousal immunity or any of that. But yeah, I mean, it can be difficult, right? I mean, and during COVID, it was one of the things that came up during COVID when everyone was meeting via Zoom. Was like, well, make sure no one else is in the room, or maybe use headphones so this way they can't hear what we're talking about. But that's how seriously we have to take that confidentiality to make sure that doesn't get spread in the community to people who aren't entitled to know that information.
Thanks.
But also, we have a lot of talented people in this community who want to offer opinions, general things you can listen, you don't have to say anything. But.
Oh, they can always give feedback, and they can do that to you, whether it's in the grocery store, they can come here in the public comment and give that feedback. And we can listen to that. You can say, and then what I think the appropriate response is that I'll take everything that you said and I'll give that to the superintendent, relate it to the board. This way, they know what your opinion is when we make our decision. Okay.
Can I ask one other question? It's helpful to have you here to hear a refresher for all of us. you had said every recommendation, everything we vote on comes to us as a recommendation from the superintendent. It's hiring, it's purchasing, everything has been vetted by the superintendent. It is public if one of us votes against that. Because as you said, we don't all have to vote yes, right?
Right.
Some of us may come to a different decision. So if someone sees me in the grocery store and said, I see you voted no on X, why did you do that?
So if it's not like a personnel issue,
Mhm.
and it's not like a student issue that might otherwise be confidential, I mean, you can have that conversation. I mean, that to me is not sharing, confidential information, or it's not taking private action to compromise the board. You could say, well, this is, I felt that we shouldn't enter into that contract with that company for this reason, but everyone else thought that we should, so that's what we did. We're moving on, majority rules, and now we're contracting with this company. So that's fine.
So just to follow up on that case, is there a best practice or a requirement that you share that information publicly at the time of the vote?
It really kind of depends upon how, I would say, what the board's norms are, but also like how the conversation goes. I mean, sometimes people just decide that they're going to vote no because I've heard people say in different school districts, I just don't feel like if I know enough about it, even though people have given me information, I don't feel comfortable voting yes on this, whatever the case may be.
So tangentially, board norms, and Beth is gonna lead the conversation on that. But let's make it a little quick.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, I should have said that to Vic.
You should have,
I apologize.
But, so yeah, I think this is from 2019, maybe 2021. I think we all agreed, because being a board attendant is hard, and we don't agree on all the time, and sometimes we have differences among ourselves, and how do we manage that and still be effective for the children, right? So we kind of did some retreats together and came up with this board norms, and which can change given we have new boards every year, right? But the one that we did in 2021, really, I mean, the primary thing I would say, there's two takeaways from it. We can go through it individually, but no surprises for anyone. So we agree that if I have a difference with a fellow board member, it's really appropriate for me to talk to them directly before I go and complain. If I have a problem with Mara, I'm not going to complain to Debbie before I talk to Mara, just to be fair, right? Because it's just, we need to work things out amongst ourselves and build our relationships. And I think I'm really proud of the fact we worked hard on our relationships, and they're good. And so no surprises. And it's the same thing. We all try to get all the same information at the same time. And it doesn't always work that way. And then we complain. We say, hey, by the way, you forgot to tell us all about this, and here it is on the agenda. That happens, right? But we do that behind the scenes so that we have a smooth meeting in the public, and we can support our superintendent and her recommendation, because it's not really a material problem. It's just a process problem. And we want to make sure we're acting smoothly together. So there's no surprises. We try not to surprise each other. We ask that the administrators don't surprise us. Even tonight, there was something on the agenda that came up probably an hour before the meeting, and so we all got an email about it saying, by the way, this is on there because this happened. So we appreciate knowing that, and it makes it easier for us to run the meetings quickly and swiftly and effectively. And the other thing is, again, we don't administer the schools, and it's one of the hardest things, I think, for all of us to do, because we're all very active. We all ran to be on the board because we have strong opinions and we want things to happen. So we're constantly pulling ourselves back, I think, from crossing the line. And so a number of the things in here, I think, or from that we've talked about, help us try to remember that we don't administrate the schools, and that the time of our administrators is incredibly precious, and they have way more to do than they have hours in the day. And so if they have 10 of us coming at them at the same time, there's no way they can do their jobs. So we as a board, and we can talk more about this in a retreat as the year goes on, but what we have done is said, if I have a question before a meeting that relates to personnel, I will go to the personnel chair first. I won't go to the superintendent because she probably knows the answer as the chair of personnel, and I don't need to bother the superintendent with that. So we usually try to go to committee chairs, and the committee chairs are the only ones who generally deal ever directly with an administrator that's not the superintendent. So none of us individually, I won't go to Rebecca, I won't go to Matt on something that doesn't involve long-term planning, or, I'm the long-term planning chair. I have a meeting coming up, I can talk to him about that. Anybody else who has a question about it would come to me first, and I would know that there was a question. So we try to manage how we interact with each other so that we're really efficient with time. And that takes a little bit to get used to, and we can all talk about that and make sure it works for everyone. But as the majority of us, I think, unanimously decided that worked for us in the past, and we can talk more about that.
The other thing you mentioned about, getting involved, and as a parent too, it's hard because, you've already been involved and you wanna, still like what you were talking, but we're parents too, and we see things like that, but we can't be that type of parent as a board member.
It's hard.
Separate, yeah.
And whenever you go to your child's, conference or something, the first thing you have to say is, I'm here as a parent. And hopefully, still doesn't get rid of the fact that you're a board member, but it is a tricky role.
And I think, on the no surprises, so, just a reminder that if you're gonna vote no, that's fine. No one will talk you out of it, but if you could let, me and Matt know. So, Matt has to change how the vote, is reported, and, he has a lot of, pardon? And the oh, yeah, sorry. Anyway, and yes, if you could let, us know so that because Matt has to change how, the vote is reported, and it just saves, it's a courtesy to everyone. Susan?
Yeah, I'll add, like, as a committee chair, we also, because we're committees of 5, so not everyone is on every committee. So it's incumbent on committee chairs, and one of the things we look at is to make sure those not on a committee have enough information before a vote. So it might be calling people to say, this is going to be on the agenda. Do you have any questions about it? And I think that's been a really good norm. And we felt like, I've never served on personnel, but if I have a question, I would call and ask a question. And before, not just wait for the meeting to say, I don't understand what we're voting on. I would always try to ask, and sharing with the committee. Let's say there's a question that comes from one member of the committee, sharing the answer and the question with the whole committee, so that it's not, everyone feels they're getting the same information. Everyone not just feels, but is getting the same information at the same time. So like for the new members, that's where like the no surprises comes in. It's not like, wait, I had no idea that was happening. Like, we want to make sure everyone's had a chance to ask their questions and understand what's coming up on the agenda, because we're all not serving. I have to trust the people serving on other committees that they're doing their due diligence for me.
Do you call it just cell phone?
Yeah, I might say, Mara, Debbie, could you give me a call? Either one of you, I have a question on this. And so someone might call, I might call Daphne as board president and say, who's the best person? This is my question. How do I get it answered? Because I want to, when we get the information on Friday of what's coming up on the meeting, and we have like over the weekend, we want to make sure that in enough time that if we need more information, there's time for us to get that information. We've had it with, like, let's say long-term planning, because things come up that we have to continue. So we might call and say, here's information that everyone should know, because this is how we're continuing moving forward, so that everyone can have as much information. Obviously, people on the committee are diving in, but we want people not on the committee to have a sufficient amount of information that they feel comfortable.
And I would just jump in and add to that and say, sometimes we realize in those conversations that sometimes the conversation is really important to be had in public, because then the public understands what our decision-making is like. So if you say, listen, I'm actually going to ask this question at the meeting as well, so that the public can understand, it's still great to give everyone a heads up, because what we never want to do is put any of us or our admin, our administrators on the spot to have to answer a question, but sometimes that's a very productive way of sharing with the community the thought process.
Oh, excuse me, Eleanor had her hand up, and that's how we do things here. We raise our hand, and then I'll try to make sure I get people in order. Eleanor?
Just want to clarify to make sure I understand. So if someone who's not on a committee has a question about a committee's work, then that person will ask the committee chair, and then that committee chair will tell both the question and the answer to the whole board, right? So they can send an email to everyone or something.
Or if it's something that, like,
Unless it's
something like,
stupid and tangential.
right, like, or, like, I'm just one, not everything has to be, but anything that might affect how people are thinking about a vote, like, oh, that's a really good question. I think someone else is probably having that question. Like, anything you think could affect anyone else's thought process you want to throw out there. And we might say, you know, to Matt or to Dr. Tu or to Kathy, like, this is going to come up. So think about how you're going to
Right,
answer
and
that.
so Kathy will send out an email every Friday afternoon, around 4 o'clock, and that will be a list of all the things, that she thinks we need to know. And so sometimes if you go to Susan with a question, Susan, what about this? Susan could say to Matt, please include this in the Friday, please ask Kathy to include this in the Friday update. And so, but I do that all the time rather than email the board. I'll say, Kathy, could you please just put that in the Friday update so people know?
Can I ask, we've gone back and forth about committee meeting minutes being sent to the full board. And where do you fall on that, Kathy? Just because in personnel, there's a lot that goes on and obviously it's closed, but I would like to share it with the full board. But I don't know.
Not to put pressure on anyone, but I do love having committee meeting minutes. The challenge is who's going to be in charge of them.
Oh, no, but see, we're there.
And you're there,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes an issue as
Mhm,
well.
mhm.
But what then we can all be clear on what was agreed. It's memorialized in writing. And also too, for other committee members, if you heard something different, because sometimes we have a different perspective and sometimes we hear things differently, that's then a great discussion point to clarify. So ideally, I think minutes are just a great way to memorialize the work that is being done.
And then sent to the full board.
And then sent to the full board. So,
That's all
you know,
right.
just in past history, what I used to do is the Friday before a board meeting, I would send all of the committee meeting minutes as well. And that kind of clarifies some things that you might not be fully involved with. And that helps. So happy to do it if you want to include that. Adam, did you have-
I just think it's important to note that we should call them notes, being that the minutes are connotate board minutes, which are much different than committee notes, which I think are really important actually, and it helps to, you know, the recommendations that come out of committee, you know, whether it's full support or 4-1, or, you know, maybe it's divisive and it's 3-2 coming out of committee.
Adam, did you?
Oh, no.
No, okay, okay. Anyone else? Beth?
No, and I think, you know, these norms, we have them up on the board docs in the general board book section, and they're public, it's up there. I have copies that you guys can have, and we can all look at that again, and if we probably will have a retreat sometime early in the year where we actually get into more nitty-gritty to make sure we're understanding the best way to effectively support Kathy, for example, because she's got her own new style, and we want to make sure we're being good partners and collaborative. So we may want to tweak this at that point, but for now, we just want to make sure you saw what we had for our existing.
Thank you, Beth, and that was very nice of you to print out those color copies at home.
No, I did only one color.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Thank you, I really appreciate that, and thank you for leading that discussion. All right, so I apologize to everyone I said would be done by 7. Yeah, we'll see. All right, the next item is item E, organization of the board annual meeting schedule, which is on the website. Is it on?
There was one mistake, even before the meeting started, I mentioned Tuesday, November 7th would be reorg for next year, because we do post this, but January, what am I saying? Anyway, I put Thursday, January 2nd, but I think reorg would be the 7th, so before I send this out, I just want everyone to, we always advertise reorg ahead of time. I mean, it can be changed up to that. It's legally acceptable, would be, it's a little better than the second Thursday, we generally don't have Thursday. So, I mean, I don't think it's an item of debate, I made a mistake, I just want to point that
Oh,
out.
that's okay. And I was gonna say there will probably be changes to it over the course of the year, so
Yes,
it's not set in
likely.
stone.
And just our committee meetings that we don't have yet set, is there timing? I mean, do you have a sense of when they might be?
I think each committee is different. I think that there was at least one change to one of the committee's policy conflicts with superintendent's roundtable, so it's not a good time to have it on Friday morning. We could do it at 6 a.m., but I like early.
Yeah, we interrupt
Fine.
meditation time.
Not 6 a.m.
You'll the administration will help us find.
Yes, and I think what we are gonna try to do is then organize it, so that we can send it out. So all members of the board have the committee schedule and the dates.
Thank you.
Yes, and could we just check, especially with the new members, about their personal work schedules? Because,
We have,
okay, great.
thank you, yep, yes. Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
We have newspapers for legal advertisements.
So,
I'm sorry.
So Matt, I don't know how much we spend on that, Janine, I don't know how much we spend on that, but in this world of technology and cloud, blah, 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 I'm just curious, why do we still have to do it in print?
Well,
Oh,
the Open
okay.
Public Meeting Act, I just want to show up a little bit, but the Open Public Meeting Act has not caught up with the, is that correct, Mr. LaPierre?
Yeah, we're gonna make you the honorary board attorney here for a second.
That's absolutely right.
Oh, Mr. President, your attorney, that's super simple.
So we still have to print?
Sadly,
Okay.
we do.
All right, just thought I'd ask again. Oh, that's next year too.
Good question.
All right, yeah, and as I go through, I'm gonna go through quickly. If you have something to say, Daphne, and I will stop. The next item is district organization. Did we revise that? Organization part?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. 6, hiring in between board meetings. And then the next one is adoption of the minutes from our December 12th meeting. And Adam and Eleanor, you weren't there, so you can abstain. Is that okay?
Sure.
Say that? Yeah. All right. Can I get a motion, please? Brian, second. Susan?
Betsy Baglia,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Adam Bierman,
Abstain.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Eleanor Hubbard, Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Rob Christopher.
All right, thanks, Mr. Golden. Now we're moving on to public comment. Public comment on any topic. Okay, all right, if there's no takers, we'll have another comment period at the end. Next up is revision to the 23-24 school calendar, and Dr. Foster.
I just want to highlight a few things, and then we will send out a letter to the community with the revised calendar. What we wanted to do is honor our students, put students first, and also their families by solidifying the last day and graduation date for the Princeton High School students. So because we are finalizing that date, we needed to now embed some, we can call them snow days because I'm hearing something over the weekend, or inclement weather days, or just school closing emergency. We had to embed that in the current calendar. So we have a sort of an if-then situation with those 3 snow days. And the reason why we have 3 snow days is because if we have a 4th inclement weather day, we can do remote learning. And so we wouldn't miss another day of school. So we've adjusted the school calendar, and I'll send it out more specifically, but highlighted 3 different days that students would be returning to school if there was a snow day. And we'll continue to communicate as the winter unfolds for us, but the first one would be February 16th, which is scheduled right now for an in-service day. We would have all students and staff come back to school on that day. It would be early dismissal, and then we would reschedule that staff and service day.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Foster. Any questions? Oh, Brian.
So just to make sure I was reading that correctly, June 14th is graduation?
Thank you. Yes. So the official date, yes, that's important. Let's say it again. June 14th is the last day of school for students and Princeton High School graduation, rain or shine.
So I have a question. So let's say, because we're gonna get our first snow in 700 days, right? Let's say it's snowy and we have, and I understand we can go remote. But let's say we choose not to. What would happen next?
So if we miss some of the days that have
Let's
already
say
been
we're on our 4th
designated,
snow
we're
day.
on our 4th
Mhm.
snow day, we could look at another day, take another day from maybe spring break.
Okay.
There are I think that's probably, we only have a couple possibilities
Yeah.
after that.
I know that, you know, you
I
can
know
blame that
it's
on
not,
us,
I know.
but, you know, remote learning didn't work for a lot of.
And I understand that, and, you know, research-wise, it doesn't, it's just something for us if it was an emergency.
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, yeah, please.
And I think we haven't revised 24, 25 yet with the snow days because I think the Board of Elections conversation.
Yeah, we're waiting, with our fingers and toes crossed for the Board of Elections.
To try and move voting out of schools.
And could I just say thank you to Dr. Foster for figuring this out? We've had a number of conversations through the years about this. Graduation has shifted multiple days. So it is though rain or shine. So I think, as you said, right, it would be moved indoors if it were
Correct,
a
rain or
very
shine.
rainy day. But
But
That's
back in the
exciting.
day, there was no air conditioning in the.
and now we're
gym.
ready,
And
right?
now there's air conditioning. Okay, first reading, policy, or bylaw amendment, and then we have, J1 appointments, J2 resignation, J3 termination, and then we're moving on to K1, competitive contracting award, generous educational financial software package. Thank you, Janine, for your work on that. 2, rejection of bid HVAC upgrades at multiple schools. 3, the 10 gig network contract award. Oh, Brian,
Yes.
you have to say, hey, you though.
K3, I thought we had, at the last meeting, decided to defer that pending further external validation and feedback from consultants. And also having an opportunity to talk about it in operations.
Okay, so would you like to make a motion to table it?
I would,
Okay,
yes.
okay, Brian, one. Second, Mara. All in favor, how are we doing this table? Is that it? We're just doing
We have to take a vote.
it? Okay.
Betsy Bagwell,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Adam Bierman,
Abstain.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Eleanor Hubbard,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Robert Christopher.
Yes.
Motion passes to table item K3.
Okay, item K4 is professional services attorney. K5 is registration, travel agenda. And so our next vote is our consent vote. We're missing a public comment, but I'll just ask now. Is there anyone left? No. Vic, you outlasted everyone.
My specialty.
All right. So can I get a motion for the consent agenda? Mara, 1, Debbie, 2.
Betsy Bagwell,
Yes.
Beth Baron,
Yes.
Adam Bierman,
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld,
Yes.
Mara Franceschi,
Yes.
Eleanor Hubbard,
Yes.
Susan Cantor,
Yes.
Daphne Kendall,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Rob Christopher.
Yes.
Consent agenda passes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bolden. And I think that's all we have for tonight. Thank you, Mr. LaPura, for joining us. Congratulations to Beth, Eleanor, and Adam on your re-election and election to the board. We're happy to have you here. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mara, second, Brian. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Yeah.